Welcome to the Stewart Squared Podcast. We've got another exciting episode planned today. We're going to talk about the Osborne effect. And somebody recently, I can't say tweeted, they threaded, but without a thread. It was just one single thread. They said something about Atari Osborne effect within the context of ChatGPT and Sam Altman announcing something. It was just like an offhand comment. And I sent it to my dad, and he was like, go check out the Osborne effect, and it's a real thing. You want to give them the context of what the Osborne is?
Yeah. So, this whole podcast comes out of me having been around in the late 70s and early 80s. It followed people were trying to start personal computer businesses, hardware and software, but they'd never run a business before and didn't know much about it. So they're just kind of going with the flow. A fellow, Adam Osborne, introduced the first portable computer. It was like 35 pounds, but it had a handle on it, and you could pick it up and take it somewhere. This is before Compact, which introduced the most successful first portable computer. So he's gone along, and he's doing really well. And this is the Osborne 1, and they're working on a replacement. So I decided to announce it. And if I remember correctly, announced it before Christmas, kind of like in the fall, and said it would be delivered in the spring. And so everybody smartly said, well, then I won't buy an Osborne until he delivers the Osborne 2. And the company effectively went out of business. So he basically signaled too early that they were introducing a new product. Every hardware company struggles with this. Apple's cut it down to a science. But, when do you announce the next one so you don't destroy sales of the current one? The tweet you sent me, the thread, we should come up with a name for it. By the way, I noticed when I was using threads that if you click on a thread, at least on mobile, it goes from being called threads to being called thread. It's a really interesting, subtle little thing. Anyway, where was I headed with that?
So, well, I mean, I can pull. So I pulled up the threads. It says, I wonder how many tech investors going all in on generative AI actually know the story about the Atari 2600 and the Pac-Man cartridges, or perhaps a more relevant product was the E.T. video game. He doesn't even mention the Osborne effect.
And it's a little bit different because when video games were done on cartridges, the cartridges only worked on one model of the video game, right? So your cartridge had to be designed and manufactured to fit that slot. And I'm not totally sure what he's referring to, but there was a point where Atari had mass manufactured hundreds of thousands, at least maybe millions, of cartridges for a particular game. And like, what I can't remember, is it really Pac-Man or was it something else? And they ended up putting them in a dump. And they wouldn't admit it, but somebody went to the dump and got a picture of all these cartridges sitting in the dump. And so it's kind of how raw it was back in the beginning.
Well, and that's what I want to talk about, because it's not raw now. It's not like it's these.
Yeah, this is history.
Yeah, well, and they're sophisticated investors. Some of them are, a lot of them are. It's a sophisticated industry now, right? Like, it's a serious industry. I think there's a lot of hype and there's a lot of bullshit, but at the end,
let me give you a really good example that's current and relevant. OpenAI issued a code red to its employees.
Yeah.
What happened there was they were busily going along, being OpenAI and being in front of everybody else, and raising a lot of money and being the dudes, if you will, in AI. So what happened is that then Google rolls out Gemini 3, and it does everything that OpenAI has been doing in separate functions, and so the hurt on OpenAI on ChatGPT was ChatGPT is fine, but you have to go to different apps. You have to go to Sora. You have to go to blah 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 to get the value out of that particular thing. Whereas Gemini, it did everything. Nano banana. Finally remembered how to call it, but and so you can use Gemini. And I myself have now started using Gemini, and I'm considering canceling my subscriptions to Claude and ChatGPT. I don't think Grok is still free, right? And I'm just doing one because right now I'm going, and this could change, but right now I'm going, so what OpenAI did was exactly what Adam Osborne did. They started announcing all this other stuff
Interesting.
before the competitive situation became clear.
Real.
And so they had to backpedal on all their new projects and say, no, only do ChatGPT.
So this is really interesting because OpenAI was doing a bunch of product stuff, and they basically were just willy-nilly, and they were doing. I got the sense that they were doing it because they were afraid of Google. Because every time Google came out with an announcement, that's exactly when OpenAI would release something important over the past 2 years, and they were fearful of Google, and I think that fear got them into a place where it actually created the prophecy where they actually got done, because I'm going to remove my subscription soon to OpenAI.
So I'll put a finer point on that.
Yeah.
But Sam Altman is being CEO of the company. Nobody's run a company that's grown this fast, so you can't say that he's inexperienced, but he has never run a company. Any advisor would say, well, you have to make a strategy. You have to decide what you're going to do 3 years in advance and then do it. And then 3 years later, you'll be in a defensible position. So he came up with the strategy. He hired Fidmo, what's her name, from DoorDash to be president of applications. So Fidmo's job was to make applications. So she started making applications. And then I can't remember the other shifts they did at the management level, but it's like he bifurcated so that he could have multiple things to focus on at one time. And it turned out to be exactly the wrong strategy. So he had to fix it. And he's smart enough to know that he had to fix it. And he issued the code red and said, okay, now everything goes into ChatGPT. I really want to know what Fidmo, you'd recognize the name Fidjmo.
I'll go look at it.
She was like chief operating officer at DoorDash, I believe. So he's smart enough, and Sam Altman's one very smart individual, to go, oops, and reverse that strategy. But it means that they're behind Google. They've now accepted Google's definition of strategic plans, and Google's ahead of them, which is always the problem. This happened with Meta. Meta lost the thing. They decided to be open source. Whatever they were doing, they built their open source Llama. And they did like 1, 2, and 3. They did all those things. And everybody decided Llama wasn't good enough. So they're sitting there going, what? Excuse my French. We've just spent billions of dollars building this, and it was the wrong thing to do. So then he goes and pays half value for whatever Alexander Wang's startup is. I can't remember right now.
Yeah.
And it's just like inevitable. You can see these things happening and go like, these people are so deep into it, they can't get any perspective. But I just saw a story in the last 2 days about how there's a lot of tension between Alexander Wang and Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
Because Mark Zuckerberg is telling Alexander what to do. Yeah. And Alexander's going like, fuck you. You don't need to tell me what to do. You paid like whatever it is, $14 billion for me.
And it's
I don't need to listen to you.
That is a specific industry that I actually have experience in. It's the RLHF industry, which is infinitely curious for me, given my philosophical bent and how they're encoding languages and bias and all these things into the RLHF. And it's not a secret that Scale AI got the way they got because it's a slot factory, and they just basically hired as many bodies as possible. And so maybe, Alexander Wang does have something, but I tend to think that it's part of the collapse of the seriousness of the tech industry that he got so big, because it was the total venture model, but like not the venture model that I've understood from you, the venture model of low interest rates, BS, let's just kind of like throw money in this really insane way at things, and they grow.
Momentum is more important than results.
Momentum, yes, interesting. I like that.
So I have this. This is a little orthogonal, but just a little bit.
Go for it.
Jan LeCun's been quoted pretty widely saying, nothing we're doing right now is AGI. Nothing we're doing is AGI. Whereas everybody's going around, well, and you can see people making commentary. I really don't know what the hell he's talking about, but it's like an LLM is not AGI. An LLM is a large language model. It's a model for how you organize your data so that you can predict the next token. And Okay, that's pretty clear. You
I
don't
like
get
that.
AGI without doing something else. Now there's a subtext going on, also involving Google, which if these things are related, and like Sundar Pichai is sitting there going, yeah, do the TPUs, do the Gemini 3, do this, do that. He's like one really, really smart dude. So the subtext going on is that Google messed with its TPUs, so the TPUs now do inference and can work with NVIDIA chips to build the large language models. So if you combine TPUs and GPUs from NVIDIA, you have something that actually could approach AGI because you get inference or reasoning. And I personally don't think that's AGI either, but that's, we can develop this thought process here. But if I just read a guide to shorted NVIDIA, should this company be worth $5 trillion, given that, what it's done is built this incredible but not totally defensible position as a supplier of GPUs tuned for LLMs. And so I'm not a really smart guy, so I have tends to get lost in this stuff. But Google has set up a perception, at least probably a reality, that the future of the chip business in AI is not LLMs, it's inference or reasoning. And I think there are other elements to this, and there's another subtext going on that's more relevant to Apple. You can tell I've been having a lot of thoughts here.
Yeah, that's great.
So, but on the Google score, so Google has TPUs. They started developing these chips years ago. And they were the first ones to develop large language models. So they understand pretty intimately what the relationship is between the processor and the application. And so I don't know this for sure, but I think they redesigned TPUs to be more what they are. I mean, tensor processing unit refers back to their original thesis of the tensor models. I won't get into the history of this. So these emerging subtexts that, in my experience in the technology business, you have to pay attention to the subtext, not the top text. If everybody understands what's going on, there's no advantage to knowing something that's not going on. So just the logic of it is if you're paying attention to the technology industry, you have to be able to look at the side. Gilman, my partner Gilman, says this is you always have to exercise. If it had rolled off my tongue, that would have been beautiful. Peripheral vision. You have to have peripheral vision. So you have to be looking over here and over there and up there, not straight at the problem, to spot the things that are going to change the dynamic. And so there's a lot of that going on with Google Gemini 3.0, with Google TPUs. And Google seems to be right in the middle of it. That's why I say if it's true, Sundar Pichai is one incredibly smart and strategic fellow.
So NVIDIA is worth $4.64 trillion and Google is worth $3.8 trillion. So that's some interesting sort of, and that's why shortage.
So can you put the revenue?
Oh,
Google's revenue is they're probably trading at
100 billion. I know that they had revenue of 110 billion this year, and it's like big
last year.
Okay, so they have
so it's 4x revenue, and NVIDIA is like 50x revenue.
No, so Alphabet currently has a higher trailing 12 months revenue at approximately 385 billion compared to NVIDIA's TTM revenue of approximately 187 billion. So almost twice the amount.
Google has almost twice.
Yeah.
And yet they're worth less than NVIDIA.
Yep.
So that's the cognitive dissonance, is like, wait a minute, this is a company that's got a lot of different businesses. A lot of people still accuse them of being focused on their search revenue, but or dependent on their search revenue. But they're valued like a real company, right? Oh, you only have $380 billion of revenue. We're not going to give you a valuation of more than $4 trillion or whatever it was. And whereas NVIDIA was over $5 trillion for a significant amount of time until very recently. And the reason NVIDIA went down is because of the TPUs.
Yeah.
And somebody decided to buy a lot of TPUs from Google. Can't remember who it was.
Okay. I'm going to go check.
I think it was Amazon. Yeah, it doesn't come back into my head.
Who bought a lot of CPUs from Google or NVIDIA?
TPUs from Google.
TPUs. Oh, okay. Yeah.
TPU.
Yeah.
Somebody made a big commitment to TPUs, and that shifted the narrative about the valuations of the company. And that's why NVIDIA went down. So you look at NVIDIA and you go like, what else do they have up their sleeve? They're just doing NVIDIA GPUs. And they've done a really good strategy in terms of having like the operating system and development environment. And so people are like really well supported while they're working with NVIDIA. But it's existential, right? You can't just be building LLMs. And that's where the subtext comes in. And that's why I think there's a shift going on, a fundamental shift.
Yeah, I agree. I love it. In October 2025, Anthropic announced its largest infrastructure deal to date, securing access up to 1 million TPUs in a deal worth tens of billions of dollars. Meta also is doing it, spend billions of dollars on Google's TPUs. OpenAI, while OpenAI primarily uses NVIDIA GPUs, reports from July 2025 indicate the company began using Google TPUs as part of a larger agreement with Google Cloud. Okay, this is a great question because for me, and Apple as well is also getting into it, and Ilya Sutskever's thing as well. So Adam Smith has the invisible hand, and all of our capitalist understanding is that companies compete, and then they compete, and then there's monopolies, and companies always want to be monopolies, and then they can't be monopolies, sometimes because of the government, sometimes because of the change inherent to the universe, and then along comes technology, and now we have like 5 companies who dominate the entire U.S. economy. Is that accurate? And that's not the final question, because the final question is, how do all of these companies that are just all doing deals with each other, and there's a bunch of funny memes out there about like, it's just like NVIDIA is doing deals with OpenAI.
All the circular stuff.
Yeah.
All the people that are commenting on the circular revenue, OpenAI contracts with Oracle to build data centers, and then Oracle contracts with NVIDIA to buy NVIDIA chips, and then NVIDIA does a deal with OpenAI. It's circular. This is an important thing to focus on, but they don't understand why. And it did happen on a much smaller scale during the internet bubble, where because advertising was where all the money was. Venture capitalists would invest in startup companies, and they'd buy a lot of advertising way before they should have. And it was really ineffective. And so when the internet bubble collapsed, the advertising revenue collapsed, and it had a broad effect. So it's not so much just an accounting issue that, they're getting revenue from one company on one hand and then sending it to another company on another hand and not really doing the business in between. The thing is that it's moving so fast, and people are trying to find an advantage that it becomes a marker or a symbol of the bubble. And so the accounting issue we kind of talked about this when we were talking about how fast you can depreciate equipment. And if you're borrowing against equipment, that becomes really important, because if you're still paying off the equipment when it becomes dysfunctional or no longer useful, that's a problem. And now, what's really interesting to me personally is we all know we're in a bubble. And when I say we, I mean, people I talk to on the street, their grandmother knows it's a bubble. It's like people aren't paying any attention, know it's a bubble. They know AI, and now we have an AI bubble. And that's kind of the how far it's permeated the general consciousness, at least in the US and to some degree in the rest of the industrial world. So, the question is, what do you do when you're in a bubble? Like, do you step out of it and decide not to participate and lose the upside? Do you keep running it and try to time your exit from it? It's like, and the contracts that are being written between these companies are much more binding than just buying stock in the public market. So if it starts to go south, there's a really embedded issue for the companies that have committed to spend so much capital.
I'm going to go research this question, which is what are the binding contracts currently going on in the AI ecosystem? Because that sounds like it's a interesting subtext. Okay, so I had a great question before I got lost on that track of thought. So we have a whole bunch of companies who are just essentially doing these deals with each other. And okay. So Andrej Karpathy is a brilliant engineer who worked at Tesla with Elon Musk and then also was working at OpenAI, recently started his own education company. He just tweeted a few days ago in this brilliant tweet, only 2 months after going on a podcast saying, all this is BS, none of this is real. 2 days ago, he's like, oh, crap, I'm way behind because I'm not focusing on all this stuff called vibe coding, which I coined the term for. I am way behind as an engineer. I can't keep up. Like I'm out I need to now switch modes and lose my skepticism. So I agree that we're not an AGI. A lot of people are calling Claude Code AGI. I think the Claude Code is a magical piece of technology, which I now no longer experience. It's too easy. It's too easy for me to build applications now. Again, as you pointed out last time we spoke, it's not too easy to build scalable applications, but it's too easy for me to build any prototype that I want now. It's not a barrier. That is crazy. That is magic. So within the coding realm, they aren't AGI, but they're really, 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 really useful. And it was funny because earlier you said that you're going to give up your Claude subscription. Claude is the only one who's making me think that I want to pay $200 a month right now because of how expensive they've recently made it, because they know that they have something really important.
And you're making yourself a, whatever you call it, vibe coder programmer. So it's important to you. I'm never going to try. I'm not even going to bother trying. So Gemini has real value to me for what I do. Right. And I'm using it like normal people use it, evaluate contracts, tell me what this means. Like my stepdaughter, Blanche, who was in Paris and had a really good bottle of sake, and she took a picture of it. So she sent me, her mother told her to send me a picture of the bottle. I'm saying, I can't read Japanese. So I put it in Gemini and said, so what does this mean in English? It gave me a briefing on the whole sake and why it was good.
But did you double check to hallucinate it? Did you double check to make sure?
Well, I know, but I know enough about sake to know that I could double check itself.
You're a subject matter expert in sake.
I've drinking enough sake at this point to kind of know what I'm talking about. So it made sense. It could have hallucinated, and I wouldn't have any other way to find out. But I'm pretty sure it was right. It had it's supposed to be paired with fish, and so I'm going like, oh yeah, that's the meal that they had and why they had that sake.
Okay. So,
anyway, I'm saying is, and I am developing a worldview right now, which might be completely wrong, but at least I have one. And my worldview is Claude is super. Claude's won the coding battle.
Yeah.
Right. They are.
Although Google
they've also won that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure Google can do it well, but the subtext on Anthropic has been all their businesses from business, right? They're selling tools to businesses who are using them and willing to pay for them. So 80% of their revenue comes from corporate contracts, and they're the programmer heaven, particularly for IT people and companies that have IT people, because you reduce the number of IT people. There's a thing that, and actually this was Google, and where it's an interesting counterpoint. There was a statement made by somebody at Microsoft in the last week or so that their strategic aim in the next year is to eliminate C++ and CS from their programming libraries. And what they can do is, and I don't know whether you're using OpenAI or Claude or Gemini, but they just sit there and feed the code into the AI and say, replace this code with one written in a different language. And it just does it, right? The AI is smart enough to understand the logic of the program, to figure out where its touch points are, and to actually just rewrite the program in a different language, which programmers refuse to do.
Wow.
That's like, they write in like Fortran 40, 50 years ago. And they never wanted to go back and rewrite the same program in a different language because it's like pointless. There's no movement forward to that. But the dumb or compliant AI is perfectly happy to replace all your code in a different language. That was really interesting.
Okay, that's really crazy. I love that LLMs are doing what programs are hating, and this is actually realized in the past. Since Andrej made that tweet, I've realized that my past 2 years have been spent very, very productively because now I'm at the cutting edge of knowing what it can do. I might actually have more understanding about vibe coding than Andrej Karpathy simply because I've run this group and I can assess. He definitely knows programming basics and programming concepts and all these things to basically make it more effective. But the stuff I know is like allowed me to jump in this way that I never felt like I jumped with the internet. Even though I grew up with the internet, I was never professionally very productive with the internet. But I feel like I've now actually got in on a good time in times of a dynamic system. So LLMs are doing what programs hate. Now what programmers are hating, the question that immediately came to my mind is verification. How do they know? And with programming, it's really easy to verify. I think as we start to automate a lot of things with LLMs, I think there's a lot of questions we don't know how to verify, particularly moral or ethical questions. And so, but that's like a tangent. So there's this thing called a universal verifier, going back to that RLHF thing. The RLHF thing, they're doing that with humans. OpenAI, when they hired Invisible Technologies and Scale AI to do this RLHF, they needed humans to verify the outputs, and then they needed other subject matter experts to then go verify those claims. And so there's this element of human verification that needs to get in it. And they're trying to automate that away with something called a universal verifier done by Noam Brown. And again, it's philosophically interesting. But this idea of like a universal verifier has this like, and they're doing it with math now too. It feels like we are on like an accelerated curve. Like, yeah, we don't have AGI, but things are accelerating. And to that bubble point, if everyone knows we're in a bubble, yet the bubble doesn't burst, could it be that we're accelerating so quickly that it doesn't burst? No, it always bursts.
Never happened. Never happened. Yeah, because expectations get ahead of reality. Partially because nobody really understands what reality is. So they start expecting stuff that's unrealistic. I say that confidently, and I'm, obviously there's always a possibility that something will happen that hasn't happened before, but the evidence is that in the general population, whether that's a population of programmers or consumers or whatever, expectations tend to run ahead of reality. So if you get into a bubble, it's likely that expectations. This is why I think that Jan LeCun is right. That people are sitting there arguing about, the internet's going to take over, have robots running around telling us what to do, et cetera, et cetera. This dystopian view. I think it's foolish. I don't think it's possible right now. And that's because you have to have a mental model for how that might happen. And the mental model means that whatever it is that's inside us is not strictly brain power, intuition, imagination, creativity, all those things. Until you can reproduce that or produce that in a machine, that's the standard. So it's not the Turing test. It's, is there a human element to the AI that means they're a player on a level playing field? And I don't see anything in this, what you were talking about, the human assisted stuff, the LLMs, the inference models. I don't see anywhere in there where the machine's going to suddenly go, okay, human, screw you. I'm on my own now. I'm better than you are.
Yeah, I really like that it's, what is the Turing test for creativity, intuition, imagination, all of the soft skills, the traditional, the right brain in Ian McGilchrist's book about the left brain versus the right brain. And that is a really, really good point. And I think based on what you just said, that we might never get there because there's this idea that consciousness is fundamental to the universe. And I actually fall in on that side, that consciousness is actually something inherent to the universe. It's not something that can be objectified or put into a model. You can't model it. And so I think it might stay out. But given that this is a great time for me to get on my soapbox and talk about my evolving theory of what Jan LeCun says and what all of these data geeks and librarians are talking about when they talk about ontologies, which we've talked about on the show. If anybody's curious, we've done a lot of shows on ontologies and how Yahoo and Amazon created them. So there's a large population that believes most of the current data science, the way that businesses do data science is actually not great, particularly given the LLMs and their ability to hallucinate. And so they think that the ontologies are going to come back. And so I think that the way we're progressing is that we have LLMs as this core piece that help us navigate the linguistic world and do natural language processing. Then we need a world model like what Jan LeCun talks about for the robots, for the physical AI, which we've talked a lot about as well. And then behind the language part, we actually need to codify business logic and all these different things inside of ontologies. So I'm now actually starting to do my first ontology for all of my notes and everything like that. And it's actually kind of fun and interesting. So that's what I think we're going to do is basically that LLMs, yeah, they're not AGI. But if we have a world model with physical AI, with robots, and we have the ability to codify knowledge in these ontologies and create this sort of like distributed brain, I think that will get us pretty close. And I don't think that we will have something for creativity, intuition, imagination, like the core fundamental human. What do you think?
I fundamentally agree with what you're saying, but another way of saying what you're saying is AI, in its broadest terms, can do the stuff that we don't want to do.
Yes, I like that.
Like the stuff we want to do is the stuff that makes us unique.
Yeah.
So I sit here and think about it. I've been thinking about this in this context of the worldview that I'm developing, which is you can't assemble a huge amount of data with billions or trillions of letters and have a LLM predict the next letter, the token or whatever it is, and be different. It has to work from existing information. So my ability to think like that is what makes me human, right? So it's not, an AI can't do that. And I believe this at a level of that, even when I'm dead and gone, I'm pretty sure that I'll still be right.
And I think you will too. It's very interesting about the specific point of just like what machines will never ever be able to do, and it actually tracks with what I've been reading relating to the compliance industrial complex. And the compliance industrial complex is super interesting, and it's basically nation states having billions of people that they need to corral like cattle. And so treating all of the human beings as a data point, which is very common for nation states for 400, 500 years. And so they're all using data to do this. And since the primary mindset of a bureaucrat inside of a nation state bureaucracy is just to basically like, well, how do I get this job done? How do I like take these millions of people and like make them do what I want? They're all treating data as this thing that is like a religion. They treat data as a religion. And so they're doing all this crazy stuff. It's a sort of a tangent that I haven't fully formed yet. And actually, well, if you have anything to respond to.
I can tell.
Yeah.
No, I know, but you haven't gotten to making the point yet.
Well, so yeah, me saying that was like, well, I'll tune in for future episodes to get to the point on that one, because I'm sure we'll talk about it. Let's go back to what we started with this, which is the Osborne effect. Is it the Osborne? Osgood? No, it's the Osborne effect. Yep.
Adam Osborne was a dude. And the relevance is in the AI world, this isn't hardware, but still it's really hard to make LLMs and it's really hard to make advances. So there is the risk of undermining your own advances by announcing it in advance.
But what does that do? Who is doing that right now? Is it just Sam Altman? Is it who is like, how is that relevant?
Well, you got the top ranks. It's not the big 5 tech companies, but it's like, let's just name them off. You got Meta, Google, Anthropic, Perplexity. Has anybody mentioned Perplexity in the last 3 months? And then, so who among those have correctly identified a strategy? at some level, Microsoft did by working with OpenAI because they knew they couldn't catch up. So they bought OpenAI's output. And that probably is trained them up, but they still are struggling with how you use AI as it exists in their enterprise systems. Which is why I think Anthropic's really interesting, is they've really focused on the programmers in the information technology department, which is where you really can get value, not by having Copilot on somebody's desktop that can make you write better or whatever. And so OpenAI showed some serious strategic chops by doing the deal with Microsoft and letting them in under the tent. But since then, it's like it looks like they felt like they made a mistake. So they've started cooling off on their Microsoft relations. It might have been Microsoft cooling off too. But in both cases, neither of them are dealing with, the underlying architecture of AI. It doesn't appear. OpenAI still may be able to by refocusing its strategy. So you have Google and Anthropic, who seem to be the only two that have really worked this out. And, maybe these other new startups like Thinking Machines and Andre's startup and stuff like that, maybe they're going to do something new. But I think they have to dibble around the edges. It's no longer possible to be in the business of defining architectures for AI and moving that ball forward. If I left anybody out, I think I got them all.
Well, yeah, you did, but there's Chinese. The Chinese are also an interesting thing, but I have a question that I want to ask based off of that. Have you been? Oh, and we'll take another 10 minutes or so. The Microsoft is not happy with Copilot usage, both inside of its company and for all the companies that they're sort of doing business with and everything like their traditional things. Like, what have you heard of this, and what goes on inside of a business that big where all of a sudden they're like they shot their shot and their shot didn't work out, and they did the thing with Google. They're still kind of relevant. They still got a lot of money. They're building nuclear power plants, but they are not in the running in terms of this AI stuff in those first two.
Yes, I have thought about this, and I have read the chatter. Copilot was bolted onto Office, and I thought, this will make everybody very productive because we are the major dominant share of productivity usage in the enterprise. So if we make it easier for people to do stuff, that will be a good thing. But it doesn't actually address the issues in a business. And Microsoft is really strange because they started, originally they started as a programmer's company. They made programming languages.
Like
and
Claude. Like Anthropic right now.
Like, a little bit like, yes, exactly. A lot like it, actually. But back in the time, that was like BASIC and C++ and other languages, and having a whole workbench and developer tools. And their programmers were the programmers who were building enterprise systems. More the sort of native programmers building applications for a platform. They had that for a while, but Apple's got strong. They've done a really good job of getting developers to commit to developing native Macintosh applications and iOS applications without paying attention to what's going on in Windows, a little bit to Android. But they changed customers. When Steve Ballmer left and what's his name? Satya Nadella came in. He basically made a strategic decision to serve the enterprise, not the programmer anymore. So he changed the culture at Microsoft, and they were running down, and they had, all the services that they had in Azure and, the Exchange servers and mail and all the stuff they were doing for companies. They have like 80% market share in that domain. The only serious competition is Amazon Web Services, which is not as big as Azure, but is close. And Google screwed it up, so Google Cloud is not considered a viable competitor in the enterprise, right? So, but these companies are big enough that you can kind of move the chess pieces around.
Yeah. So basically, I just got an insight. Anthropic is coming in and taking as you just talked about. So Satya started going towards enterprises, left the programmers behind. Copilot tried to get some of the programmers, but they didn't do it. And now Anthropic is becoming them. So really what Satya should have done is done the deal with Anthropic in those early days.
At some level, maybe, although it was much riskier, not, because people didn't recognize what Anthropic was doing.
Yeah.
But Anthropic, and you got to give, what's his name, Dari Amadai, you got to give him kudos for his strategy. Because basically what he's doing is saying, if you're a programmer sitting inside the enterprise, well, number one, you don't give a shit about Copilot. That doesn't even show up on your screen, right? Yeah. You're sitting there writing in a developer environment.
Oh, interesting.
And so he said, well, let's solve that person's problem and we'll focus everything on it. And of course, IT is where to get money out of companies, right? Any of the other departments much harder to get money out of than IT because it's considered competitive in technology. So he burrowed in deep. And I hadn't thought this through before, but yeah, at some level, Anthropic is a core risk for Microsoft. Partially the mistake with doing the OpenAI deal is that OpenAI wasn't as focused on coding. They were trying to solve the generic problem with chatbots. Yeah. Which is what led to Microsoft doing Copilot as well. That was a direct relationship to the chatbot, ChatGPT. They wanted to have their own.
Okay, so as you said that, I want to go back to that earlier part of the conversation where all these guys are doing deals with each other. So I wanted to understand, in order to de-risk what you just said, is Microsoft doing any deals with Anthropic? And of course, yes, Anthropic entered into a major strategic partnership with Microsoft in late 2025. AI Industries Alliance Landscape. Okay, so Microsoft committed to investing up to $5 billion in Anthropic. They've got a compute commitment for Microsoft Azure of $30 billion and model availability. So it's just so it's so hard to unwind it. It's like and this goes back to my fundamental thing of like, well, maybe it's just China versus the US, and that the US should be considered as the same entity when compared with China, right? Do you see any flaws in that?
Oh, yeah. First of all, because China isn't what most people think China is.
Yeah.
They view it as a central command and control economy and society, which is easy to do because, of course, they disappear people and they have the Great Wall of China, and that's all a centralized resource. But a lot of the activity on the ground in China happens in the cities with the mayors. And it's not called the federal government, but the Chinese Communist Party does not control the mayors. The mayors control funding for projects and policy in different cities. So, the parallel you're trying to make between the U.S. with a capitalist economy and China with a centralized economy, there is weakness in China's ability to command and control. And there's a tension there between letting people be entrepreneurial to do the things they can't predict and the centralized control that allows them to invest heavily in the things that they already know they need to do. The U.S. is really strong on the first and then really weak on the latter, because even with Trump running around writing executive orders, our system is not set up for people to be obedient.
Which I'm still in favor of. I think the final word will be had, but it might be a while. It might be like 20 or 30 years until the return of American disagreeableness, polite disagreeableness.
But The Ugly American. If you've never read that book, it's broken.
What is it?
The Ugly American.
The Ugly
came
American.
out in the 60s. I think it came out in the 60s. Might have been 70s, but that's because Americans were traveling all over the world and we were the only ones doing it. And we wore shorts and floppies and people looked at us and said, "Oh, those people have no taste." And,
uncultured people from that other hemisphere. Well, that was fun. Any other things you want to share about this topic or any other ones?
If I was good, I probably would remember the one that I might have, but I can't. So, nope.
We'll tune in next week. Thank you, guys.